The Phoenix Suns have their roster finalized at this very moment. So CJ and I wanted to dive in and do a little bit of a breakdown discussing some potential starting lineups that the Phoenix Suns could run out with this team, possible bench lineups, and who could be in the crunch time for this Phoenix Suns roster. We'll be debating all of that and breaking down everything revolving around this Phoenix Suns team in this episode of Suns Digest. Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Bruce Veliz, along with my co-host, CJ Pierre. And CJ, let's get into the video at hand. Let's get and dive into it right into it. As you guys know, the Suns roster is finalized. They have 15 guys under roster, so we're going to be diving in and predicting the Suns starting five for this year. Now, CJ, Matt Ishbia, James Jones, they have said they want to be a competing team, a winning team, and want to remain in that playoff hunt. And we've seen that with them stacking up a bunch of money into the luxury tax to keep this team afloat. As we all know that there are some big stars on this team with some players that could kind of seemingly be six-man guys off the bench or could be swingers for starters. So who is your prediction for your starting five, CJ?
So yeah, I think this is a interesting exercise that we're going to kind of be doing here. Because right now with the Suns, like you said, they have the 15 players under contract. There are the two-way guys as well. But when we're looking at the roster as is, I think you can kind of put together some interesting formations, interesting lineups. I don't think we're going to necessarily see one starting lineup over the course of the year. Obviously, there are going to be injuries and things like that that will inevitably pop up. Hopefully, nothing too serious that can derail our season here. But I think I've got the perfect starting five here that I think the Suns are going to roll out. So I have essentially run it back. Okay, that's where I'm at. Okay, I've got the starting five. I've got Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Grayson Allen, Kevin Durant, and Yusuf Nurkic as my starting five. I think obviously when you go out there, you got the big three. You've got them. They're going to be in there no matter what. I think the interesting thing for me is based on what the Suns did this offseason is that they guaranteed a spot for Grayson Allen to me in that starting lineup. I think he is going to be a key factor in that starting unit that kind of makes everything kind of flow the way Mike Budenholzer wants it to. He is going to be the best shooter that's going to be on the floor, the best pure shooter, and he's going to get a lot of open shots in this offense. And I think it'll be a very valuable asset to have him on the floor with Durant, with Beal, with Booker. Obviously, having Nurkic in there, he's going to be the best offensive center that's on the roster. He's going to command a lot of attention in the middle if he gets the ball in the low post and there's matchups. I think he's going to have a bit more opportunities to make plays on the pick and roll as well. But that's my starting lineup. I got Beal, I got Booker, I got Allen, Durant, and Nurkic in my starting five.
All right, CJ. All right, TJ. I like the roster. I like that you're bringing it back, and I think that a lot of Suns fans would agree with your roster. I think that with a majority of this Suns team, like we mentioned, the big three is obviously going to be out there starting Durant, Booker, Beal. Obviously, those three guys, they're making $50 million each. They're going to be starting on this floor. Nurkic is obviously the other center, really the one of the only two really true big men that they have under roster that is NBA ready. Therefore, they have to kind of start him at the center. But the swing position where you're saying is with Grayson Allen. Now, you had Grayson Allen starting. Personally, for me, I'm going to have Grayson Allen come off the bench, and I'm going to start our boy, Royce O'Neal. Now, I've seen and I've discussed with this Suns team, I think that they have a lot of wings under roster now. Obviously, bringing back Royce O'Neal. We saw Ryan Dunn get obviously drafted. We saw David Roddy look pretty decent. They have some other like tweener wings as well with like Bull, Iguodaro, maybe playing the 4/5. We don't really know where they're gonna fit. Kevin Durant. I think that Grayson Allen being that additive shooter off the bench could be that extra, little oomph, and you allows Kevin Durant to kind of slot and play that power forward position a little bit more freely with having another 3-and-D wing in Royce O'Neal alongside with him. I know that the issues kind of with Royce O'Neal was his shooting wasn't the greatest last season, so maybe having that implemented with this starting lineup wouldn't be great, and having that extra additive shooting like you had with Grayson Allen is key. But I'm going to go with Royce just for the additive size and defense with the length ability, how I kind of want to have the formation start. But ultimately, I don't think you could go wrong with either guys being in the starting lineup.
Yeah, I like it. I don't hate it. I like the idea, particularly of having Grayson Allen on the bench. I probably would have leaned more towards having Grayson Allen on the bench if it was a different lineup that had a true point guard in. If they maybe would have gone out and gotten someone like a Kyle Lowry, then I probably maybe would have made that decision in that case. But I do like Royce O'Neal. I'm going to be mentioning him a little bit later in terms of where he's going to be in my rotation as well. But I don't hate you having him in the starting five.
And I think that's the thing. I think with the Suns fans here, there's really realistically a top six. You know what I mean when you're looking at this starting lineup. And regardless if you put Grayson Allen in or you put Royce O'Neal in that starting lineup, fans will be happy. And I think throughout the season, we're going to see him switch it up, change it up, kind of experiment depending on the matchups. And then when it comes playoff time, whoever is the steadier defender or the better shooter might get that jump for the starting spot. But CJ, let's kind of dive in and look at the bench unit here and talking about who's going to be coming off the bench for the Phoenix Suns. Now, we saw them make some good moves in this offseason with them being in the second apron. They were allowed to bring back some solid guys on the veteran minimums. And we saw through the Summer League some of these players like David Roddy, Oso Ighodaro, and even Ryan Dunn surprise us and give us some good outlooks. So, who's going to be the five that 4 or 5 that are going to be coming off the bench, that second unit for you guys for this Suns roster?
Right. This was a little harder. This was definitely the hardest part because I feel like there's a lot of talent, particularly in the wing positions on this Suns team. But I had to break it down, not just based on what happened in the offseason, but also a little bit of what I saw in Summer League. So this is what I got coming off the bench. Obviously, I have Royce O'Neal coming off the bench. I think he's probably going to be the key factor. Monte Morris, the true point guard I've been begging the Suns to get. We talked about it. Point guard, point guard, point guard. You need a point guard on this roster. He is definitely going to be in my rotation as well. Also, the other addition that they made in the offseason in Mason Plumlee, I think having him a defensive big coming off the bench is going to be key. So I have two other guys that I honestly think are going to get consistent minutes this season. And this kind of maybe goes against the grain a little bit in terms of what the Suns traditionally do, but stay with me here. Also got Bol getting consistent minutes. And I also have Oso Ighodaro getting consistent minutes on this team as a rookie. Yes, the second round pick, Oso Ighodaro. I loved what he did in Summer League. He showed he has way more of an offensive game than I realized when he was drafted. I think he showed huge strides in terms of his ability to be a help defender, his ability to be an like in the post defender. I think he's got a lot of skills. He's got a lot of athleticism in the open floor. He can slash to the basket. He can finish at the rim. I think Oso Ighodaro earned himself some consistent minutes. We'll have to see exactly what happens in training camp. But when I walked away from Summer League and I looked at that Suns roster, yes, David Roddy really showed it out and he showed a lot of, potential. I don't want to ignore that. But for me, it was also Ighodaro who really stood out as to me the best player that was on that Suns Summer League team. Now, for me, the biggest omission in my bench unit is Ryan Dunn. I was really expecting more out of him in Summer League. I was expecting him to be more of a focal point and more of a factor in terms of what that team did in their game flow. And, he really didn't really develop much in terms of an offensive game, really struggled shooting from the perimeter. He had really great moments as an on-ball defender, but struggled in like other concepts, picking up rotations, struggled in the pick and roll, struggled with help defense. He got backdoor cut a few times and led to some wide open baskets. I just really think he had some struggles that really may have pushed him back in the eyes of the Suns coaching staff, and that may pave the way for guys like Josh Okogie probably to get more minutes over him. But because of the lineup, I think the Suns are going to want to go with think they're going to want to try and play a little bit bigger than they did last year, which is why I have Bol in there getting minutes as well. I think Bol can probably really be kind of a 2-3 even at his size and his the gifts that he has offensively as well. Adding Royce O'Neal, adding Monte Morris, the shooters that wouldn't really factor in on the bench would be Oso and Plumlee. If you add Dunn into that mix, then you're adding a third guy who's not really a great shooter. So that's the bench I got. The bench rotation I got. Kamate Morris, I got Royce O'Neal, I got Bol, I got Mason Plumlee, and I've got the rookie Oso Ighodaro coming off the bench getting minutes for the Suns this season.
So I like to hear that Oso is coming off the bench. Guy from Marquette, someone who I got to see play in the Big East while I was at college, was a standout player and, like you said, did impress me more in the summer league offensively with his tools. I thought he was going to be a guy that was just going to kind of come in, be a kind of do it all, maybe help out here and there, but never not necessarily stand out in some aspect. But I think in the summer league he really proved that for us. Ultimately, though, I don't necessarily know if he's going to be making my bench cut for this Suns roster for this moment. I still think he has a little bit to prove with this Suns team and with them wanting to be a win now squad at this very moment. Obviously, we'll see in training camp what happens, but at this very moment, I think they're going to go with a little bit more of their veteran ready guys. So, like you mentioned, I'm going to have Grayson Allen obviously coming off this bench, another shooter being that six-man scorer for this team alongside two guys that you mentioned, obviously Monte Morris and Mason Plumlee. Now, Monte Morris is a solid point guard, someone that we screamed for, someone that we wanted on this roster, just a point guard in general. And I think he's going to be a good fit for us. Maybe he could even end some of the games for the Suns. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. But I think that Monte Morris is a nice key piece to have alongside. And Mason Plumlee, good defensive, rim protecting big. I think can be a solid contributor on that side. A little bit better than Drew Eubanks, and I think he's going to slide into that center position. So that ultimately leads to kind of two more spots for me. Realistically, see from this, it's from the 2 to 4 position, and the Suns have a lot of guys that can really interestingly kind of fit in there. And I think that's what's good with this creativity with this team. You got a guy like Ryan Dunn, who was a rookie this year, who is a solid defender. Not really the best offensive player, but if he can be solid on defense, his defense might give him a shot just to play in the NBA. We saw David Roddy do really solid in the summer league as well, kind of being that focal point for this Suns team, really their go-to guy, especially in that Oklahoma City Thunder game. And I think that's going to give him a little bit of a boost of confidence as well. And then you also look at a guy in Josh Okogie who just got paid a little bit more of a bump at $8 million contract to kind of come back to this Suns team and help them out. I think he's going to be a solid defensive piece. Ultimately, I think they're gonna and Bol too as well. Excuse me, but Bol, like you mentioned as well, I think he's a guy that's also can be a kind of tweener and kind of fight for some minutes. Ultimately, I think my rotation that I'm going to lock in and kind of go with at this very moment is going to be Monte Morris. I'm going to kind of change it up. I'm going to go Josh Okogie at the 2, Grayson Allen at the 3, and then I'm going to throw in Bol and Mason Plumlee at the 5. Ultimately, I think the rookies do get pushed out due to the fact that the Suns want to take that leap right now and be a competent team. But if we see some stretches where they don't look like that competent team. Or maybe some of these guys in training camp do kind of stand out and shine out. I could see Iguodala or Ryan Dunn implementing himself into this lineup or rotation by February.
Yeah, I don't hate that lineup. Josh Okogie was right on the outside looking in for me when I was putting my bench lineup together. I think he could definitely be the one that actually fits into that rotation. If I'm wrong about what the Suns think about Oso Ighodaro, I just think that because of what he showed in summer league, I don't think that they're going to want to keep him not in the rotation for too long. I think he starts in the developmental, maybe starts in the G League, but I think Oso was probably gonna find himself in the Suns legitimate rotation sooner rather than later. But I do like the sliding Okogie in there, having a guy who can play hard nosed defense, guard the best player at certain times. It's a good pick.
And I'm like I think there's also like when you look at that third rotation of guys as well as kind of the guys that we didn't mention, guys like Damian Lee or Ryan Dunn or David Roddy, like those guys I still think are going to be able to fight for bench minutes and some nights depending on the matchups or just depending on how they've been playing in practice might get the go and we might see some different lineups coming out of the bench, which would be interesting for the Phoenix Suns to kind of figure out who are going to be their key impact players off the bench because I think similar how last year they found out they didn't have any of those guys and had to trade for Royce O'Neal. I think they have to figure out who are going to be those key impact guys before the deadline. So at the deadline, if they need to make a quick move here or there, they're able to do so with knowing that they can have guys playing specific roles.
Totally agree.
All right. And CJ, lastly, the kind of last lineup that we're going to go into, which I think is the most exciting lineup to kind of break down and kind of get into here, is the crunch time lineup. Now, as we know, with this Suns team, some question marks with crunch time last year. You know what I mean? Offensive side, defensive side, not really meshing really well. Now, Budenholzer's obviously the guy to kind of bring in here to kind of mesh that, kind of change that. Me and you very happy that a guy like Monte Morris can hopefully seemingly help that booster that as well. CJ, what is your crunch time five when the Suns need a bucket? They need to get down to it. They need to get the dub. Who is the five that Budenholzer is throwing out there to secure it for the Valley?
Right. Just to give some clarification, when I think of crunch time, I'm thinking like last 5 minutes of the game. Game's close, it's tight, within a couple of possessions type situation. It's going back and forth. What's the lineup that I want out there more often than not? So obviously it's going to be matchup dependent. It's not going to be necessarily look the same every single time. It's going to, depend on who's hot, who's cold. But this is the lineup that I want the Suns to roll out there. Now, I get it. Okay, guys. I don't want it in the comments. Don't at me. I know I've been screaming point guard, point guard, point guard. Don't have Monte Morris in my closing lineup. I don't. Know he's a really solid backup point guard, but at the end of the day, I think he's going to be more use. He's going to be more necessary during the over the flow of the game, as opposed to like what happens in crunch time. So I don't have Monte Morris on the floor at crunch time. I've got the big three: Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal. Got Grayson Allen, and then I've got Royce O'Neal. So I've got the Suns going small ball in the crunch time, and I've got Kevin Durant kind of playing the pseudo center, got them going 5 out, and then I've got Royce O'Neal at the 4, Grayson Allen at the 3, and then Booker Beal playing the guard spots. I think that is going to be their best lineup, particularly under Mike Budenholzer. I think he's going to have a really creative sense of what he's going to want to do with that lineup. O'Neal is going to probably be the one that sets a lot of picks in those scenarios because he's going to have, have the matchup problem that, Booker and Beal are going to want to get off on. Grayson Allen's going to be, that's kind of spot up shooter, can hit some clutch buckets. And then, of course, you've got KD. If he's going to have a big man on him, he's going to cook him. It's not even going to be a problem. I think that is the ideal crunch time lineup for the Suns. Again, it's small ball. It's, death lineup, say whatever you want. These are the best 5 players on the Suns roster. I think these are the guys you want on the floor closing the deal.
Yeah, CJ, I don't think you could put it any better. As we were talking about this, as we were thinking about it, I was obviously like thinking maybe Nurkic should be out there, but at the end of the day, I just don't trust him to not get into foul trouble or to make a just boneheaded move on the defensive side to cost the Suns a bucket. And even though the Suns would be, a 5 out team, it would be a little bit weak on the defensive side being an interior presence, having KD run that center. He's 6'10", almost 7 feet. He can guard any center. He can get block shots. He can be a perimeter paint beast for us in the last couple minutes. I agree with man. Have Royce O'Neal, have Grayson Allen be out there with the big three, run all the shooters, generate the most offense that you can. I think maybe towards the end of the season, or depending on some of the matchups, maybe you take out a guy like Royce O'Neal or Grayson Allen and throw maybe in a Josh Okogie or Ryan Dunn for the defensive side of things. But ultimately, besides that, obviously those guys I think have to work up to that role. At this very moment, I think the 5 that you named is the best 5 that the Suns have under roster. Obviously, might not work the best on the court at all times, but I think at the end of the game, when you need a bucket and when you need to play hard defense, guys like Royce O'Neal and Kevin Durant will hold you on that side, and hopefully guys like Devin Booker, Grayson Allen, and Bradley Beal can buy you a bucket on the offensive side to get you going.
Yeah, it was such a this was really tough for me because all my logic is like you need at least one big guy on the floor even in those moments, but I just couldn't ignore the fact that these are just the 5 best players on the team. Those are the guys that you want playing, even when you're going back and forth dealing with defense. Royce O'Neal and Kevin Durant, I feel like can hold their own enough on the defensive end, guarding other guys who might be bigger than them. I think when Devin Booker gets locked in, he's a solid defender. Even Grayson Allen, when he's like, really into it, he can be a really pesky defender as well. So I'm not as concerned about the defensive side of the ball. If there's an opportunity, you can play around with subs, subbing Nurkic in at times, subbing Okogie in at times for defensive purposes, or if you just really need a rebound. But I think just over the flow of, the end of the game scenario, those are the 5 guys that I feel the most confident in. So the fact that we're on the same page there is, to me, makes lockstep. That's really all that matters, is what you do in winning time. And I think that that's the lineup the Suns have, and I think it's a good lineup. I think honestly think it would probably be one of the better closing lineups in the entire league.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you mentioned having the no center kind of scares me as well, not having that big presence, that big body, especially with how the league is right now with obviously Jokic and Embiid and all those guys. So maybe obviously like we said, some different lineups, but I honestly think that, like you said, that this is the best five that the Suns could close out the game with, and I think it can be a top half closing lineup in this entire NBA and can definitely help the Suns get some wins because we saw last year. Obviously, their assist to turnover ratio wasn't there good, and their clutch rating wasn't the greatest either. So if their clutch rating can get up, if they can win some of these later games, especially going into the playoffs and in the playoffs, that will be huge for the Phoenix Suns to kind of, bolster up and get ready for this offseason. But we broke down our roster breakdowns, going over the starting lineups, bench lineups, kind of disagreed on some pieces, but the Suns have a bajillion of guys that can kind of fit in either way. So obviously that's going to happen. But we luckily agreed on the crunch time lineup. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this little long former episode of Suns Digest here, but we appreciate you guys tuning in and showing your support, hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button. CJ and I will be bringing you guys daily content revolving around the Suns throughout the entire offseason leading up to the season, and with the season starting up in a couple of months, we'll have content revolving around there as well. So if you want to make sure you stay up to date, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We really do appreciate it. Once again, I'm Bruce Velez with my co-host CJ Pierre. We'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a great rest of your night and go Phoenix Suns.